guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a first impressions video for you, but I want to have a little discussion beforehand. So this is a buck box. In a second, I'll get you the knife that I want to talk about. But before I do, I want to make a comment on the Buck 110, okay? The Buck 110, and by the way, my Buck 110 lightweight review, I get some interesting comments over there. A lot of people don't like that I wasn't a fan of that knife. Anyway, I think anyone in the knife world, in the knife community, who appreciates folding knives, who appreciates carrying them, the innovation, who enjoys a collection, has got to give credit where credit is due. The Buck 110 deserves props because it was the knife that started it all. It really was. Okay, and in fact, even for myself, although I didn't know it at the time, this was the first knife I bought with my own money. I'd gotten a couple of Victorinoxes as gifts before this, and I also had like an old Barlow style knife. But anyway, with my own money, this was the first knife that I bought, and it's obviously right a Buck 110 clone. It's made by Charade, but of course, you know, everyone has one of these. Kershaw has one. A number of companies. There's tons of Buck 110 clones out there. That's what I bought, not even knowing. So even I, owe my own interest in knives to the Buck 110, even though, as I say, I didn't recognize it at the time. If I'd known, maybe I would have bought that. But, all right, I have to say this, and this knife, I think, does a pretty good job of demonstrating this. The Buck 110 was a great knife for its time. All right, but the fact is that at this point, the design and the technology is pretty dated. All right, it's not easy to open with one hand. It's not easy and convenient to carry. It's not easy and convenient to close. Yes, it will cut stuff. All right, and I'll grant that very easily. But I'm looking in a modern folding knife for more than a knife that just cuts stuff. I want it to be convenient. I want it to be lightweight. I want it to be comfortable in pocket and in hand. I want, a number of things that modern innovation has helped with. And the Buck 110 just isn't there at this point. And well, isn't there anymore. Of course, it used to be the latest and greatest. But guess what? I don't carry, a Motorola flip phone anymore. Right? It's a great phone, and it was the phone that sort of showed everyone that we could all carry a cell phone on our person all the time, and it was such a cool innovation and really changed the way things work. But no one carries one anymore. Well, they can still respect it. And the same is true of old cars. There are tons of great, like the Model T Ford is such a cool car, and what Henry Ford did for car production is amazing. But again, right, we don't keep driving Model T Fords because what he did was amazing. And if we say, yeah, I wouldn't drive one, that doesn't disparage what was originally done. All right, now, I reviewed the Buck 110 lightweight a little while ago. And I pretty resoundingly said, this is a knife to pass on. All right. Now, I did give it, going into that review and going into buying this knife, okay, and using it and giving it a chance, I knew going in, there's no clip, okay, there's no thumb studs, there's a few things that it's not going to have, and that's fine. I was perfectly willing to give it a pass for that stuff, but I thought, if this could be a lightweight, budget-friendly knife that really works well and is well implemented, this could be a real win, even if it's probably not the knife I'm going to carry all the time. I think a lot of people could really appreciate it. However, the thing I couldn't get over, right? It's got Bucks 420 HC, which is fine steel in a budget knife. The two big things that I couldn't get over were the pin construction, right? At this point, there's no excuse for that. It should never be used. No knife should be pinned together, period. Okay. Number two, it's got blade play, and it's bad, and you don't even have to, if you barely touch it. And what that means is every time I cut into something with this knife, I can feel the blade moving around, and that is not cool as far as I'm concerned, right? That drives me crazy. And perhaps I would be willing to give it a pass if it was and I've had knives before where if you really reef on it, you can get the blade to move a little bit, but this is severe, okay? So, not impressed, right? And especially at the price point, 25 bucks, that's pretty cheap, okay, I'll admit. But there are lots of knives available for $25, $30, and many of them would blow this thing out of the water. And so for that reason, I had to say, just skip it, right? There are a couple knives I'll bring in just as quick examples. And yes, they're about $10 more, okay? But with a little bit of searching, you can often find knives that would be considerably better than this at a better price point, or at least as good, all right? And so here's a couple of examples of knives that I would easily recommend over that. And if you want something very budget friendly that you can just throw in your pocket and take out to cut stuff, the Bird Raven 2 or the Ontario Rat Model 1 are both fantastic. And I'll put links down in the description box below to Amazon links for those knives. All right, now we're gonna throw a little bit of a fly in the ointment. This is the knife that I actually want to give you guys a first impressions on. And I've been having this conversation because, I wanted to address some of these things. I saw this, a little while back, and I've looked at it. Buck just will not quit on the 110, right? They are convinced that their success is totally tied to the Buck 110. And so, right, they're going to keep innovating it and changing it and updating it as long as they're around, I'm sure. And there will be people who buy it, but I suspect a lot of them will be people who don't know better, right? If you ask them what kind of folding knife should you get, they're just going to say a Buck knife because that's the only folding knife brand that they even know exists. All right. So, you've got to give credit. Buck's marketing is second to none. And the average knife person, they're going to look for a Buck knife. They really are. That's the way it goes. And so they're going to buy these, no question, especially when it's got that bright color and when, it's going to stand out in a profit strip at Walmart or whatever. They're definitely going to buy it. All right. In fact, Buck, I think, is so, people just love the 110 and people will just keep buying it. So I'm pretty sure next year, in Buck's lineup, we're going to see a Buck 110 with bearings and a flipper tab. Right? Because they're just, right, whatever they're going to do. If they make an auto knife, they're going to make an auto 110, okay? If they make a knife in a high-end steel, they're going to make a 110 in a high-end steel. If they make a knife in fancy materials, they're going to make a 110 in fancy materials. So if they make a knife on bearings, they're going to make a 110 on bearings. Like, they just can't help themselves, all right? And so now they've made a 110 that is nice and slim. It still has the back lock way back here at the back. So this is a two-hand closing knife, unless you really don't need your fingers all that badly. But most of us at least like to use our fingers and want them around. So this is going to be a one-hand opener, two-hand closer. It does have a pocket clip. And guess what it doesn't have? It doesn't have up and down blade play, right? It doesn't even have side to side. Yeah, there's no real, I guess if I really reef on it, I'm pushing really hard and I can get it to move a little bit. Okay, but that's not really fair, especially for a knife at this price point. So it carries easily. In fact, it carries really, really well. Okay, it cuts stuff well. It's got decent steel. Now, I don't love the fact that they always put a recurve on these blades. I don't know why. Apparently built in the US doesn't mean what it once meant, right? I would not call this the work of a skilled craftsman. Anyway, that aside, it's still pretty easy to sharpen, and I'm not going to take points away for that. Lots of knives that come out, especially in the budget price point. How many Kershaws have we looked at? CRKTs, lots of knives have a tendency to, be sharpened poorly and end up with a bit of a recurve there. But the fact is, this is actually really well done. There's no blade play. And as I said, it's easy to carry. It slices like crazy. If you are the type of guy who does a little bit of food prep with your knife, the hollow grind on this makes it crazy thin behind the edge. So I've got to give a little bit of credit to Buck. Now, I haven't spent enough time with this to really get to know it. This is still a first impressions, but Buck is kind of making me eat my words here. This is pretty good. It's pretty big, 8 5/8 inches, 3 5/8 on the blade, about 3 3/8 cutting edge. Only weighs 3 ounces, okay? So there's really not a lot to complain about. Now, it's not the most fidget-friendly knife, but most backlocks are not. And really, outside of making it a mid-back lock rather than a rear back lock, it's doing most of the stuff that, say, a Spyderco Enduro would do or lots of cold steels would do. It's not going to be as strong as a cold steel. But the fact is, this is pretty well done. And so my overall thoughts on this, it's a decent knife. By the way, I love this clip. I like the shorter clips. I'm tempted to email Benchmade and get some of the shorter clips from the bug out for a couple of my other Benchmades. I like the shorter clip. It goes in and out of pocket really well. It's really unnoticeable in pocket. It really is. And so look, guys, this is pretty well done. I'm going to use it. I'm going to play with it. I'm going to cut stuff with it. I'm going to compare it to other knives, and you will get a full review. But I got to give some credit here. They have done a pretty stinking good job at a pretty reasonable price point. I think these do cost a little more than the lightweight. Okay, but here's my initial impression is Buck has offered something that's pretty functional with a nice nod to the traditional. You can still tell it's supposed to be a Buck 110, all right, but it just has some stuff that your typical 110 doesn't have that make it a little bit nicer. And they've kept the price low while not completely blowing it in other areas. Yes, it still has the pin construction, which I don't like, but I've got to give some credit here to Buck. They've kind of, I think I can initially say that I kind of like this knife. All right, now I'll use it and test it and play with it and see what happens over time. But Buck, you've done a pretty good job actually updating the 110 to something that someone who appreciates the modern folding knife, a trend that, yes, you started, can actually appreciate. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this knife. Are you going to buy one? Is it still a pass for you? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.